G'day guys and welcome, my name is Michael and I am the Dead Aussie Gamer, here to share with you my tips, tricks, ideas and strategies for playing and running tabletop role-playing games. Now today we've got a very special follow-up video to our previous one on the hero's journey. In the hero's journey we covered a whole bunch of checkpoints that you as a GM want to keep in mind as you run your players through your narrative and your story. But I thought to myself, while it's important to understand where our players need to go, behind the scenes as a GM, we also need to be aware of where our villain is traveling. Where is it that our villain goes during the narrative? How do we build them? And of course, what can we do to polish them up? We're going to be talking about that today as we explore the villain's journey. So the first step to the villain's journey is none other than the birth of a villain. Now, this isn't, of course, their origin story. I mean, of course, in some places it can be. And of course, there are many shades of villain. The origins of any type of villain is obviously going to be determined by the type that it happens to be. Is it an anti-villain? Is it a tragic villain? Is it a ruthless or callous villain? I actually did a video on all the different types of villains, so if you want that, check out the link in the description below because that's also a great video and covers a whole bunch of really cool different inspiring types of villains. But what we're going to be talking about today is the birth of one. What moment changed this person, this monster, this creature, from being just another mundane encounter to being something that is a primary antagonist for your game? Was it a single bad day that corrupted someone who was good? Was it a world-changing event that happened to influence the simple nature of an individual? Or were they simply born that way? Whatever the case is, defining the birth or that moment where this person, creature, monster, whatever, becomes a villain, what that'll actually do is it'll polish the motivation behind that villain. And for you, the players will then start to connect to and relate to the type of villain you're trying to portray. If you're making a sympathetic villain, such as a paladin who has lost their way, that moment, that time where they change, shapes how it is the players view it. This anti-paladin only fell because his wife, another paladin in service to the church, was thrown under the bus after she had saved her entire platoon from the wrath of a demon. They accused her of being possessed, and that being the only way that she could escape. Despite the protests of the paladin, his wife was executed by the church. He then vowed forever to turn to an enemy of the church and bring them and all of their zealous paladins down once and for all. This moment of birth is a palpable one because it gives your players the impression that they might be able to be reasoned with, that they might be able to be returned, and of course there may even be another quest involved where you go out and you try and find these corrupted and tainted paladins who betrayed this person. On the other hand, you could also end up with this is just a really big monster. He was the strongest of his kin and ate the previous chieftain before taking power. Everyone is too afraid to strike back at this particular villain. Lo and behold, we have the birth of a villain. Closely following this moment of birth is, of course, their rise. And I speak, of course, of the rise to power. Now, of course, there is such a thing as individual power. You do not need an army to be powerful. You do not need to be even a higher CR to be powerful. But what you need is power to influence the story. Now, in some cases, this could be a magic item or artifact, something that is going to be driving your story to begin with. This could be an individual strength, as I mentioned, such as a fire giant rising to king. It could also be the formation of an army or small contingent of people who follow a zealotous belief. What is it that makes your villain able to influence the world in such a way that your players need to intervene? Now, a single villain who is just out for a stroll, murdering people because he's a jerk, that is not really a villain. That's a bad guy, that's a monster, that's an encounter. But it isn't until that power rises to a point where the world is being influenced that you really have a villain on your hands. And we, of course, as GMs, want to communicate that to our player, and no better way can we do that than through fear and foreshadowing, which is our next step. So once we understand where the villain has come from, how it is they've grown in strength in order to influence the world. The next bit is trying to communicate that with our players. Now, don't be too excited at this step. One common mistake that people can make is by jumping the gun and revealing their villain too early. One thing I like about a lot of pre-written adventures is you'll often find that there is a little mini quest at the beginning of this adventure, something that is almost completely irrelevant to the plot of your major villain. By doing this, we get that sense of achievement before we start picking up the trail of the villain. Once you have introduced that fear and foreshadowing, something that has occurred because the villain is moving, you hear that all the monsters have started moving into your local area because they've been chased away from a nearby mountain. Something big and predatorial has moved in, and it's made it dangerous for you. This foreshadowing gives your players a sense of danger and gives them a scope of the difficulty that they will face going into the campaign. If you do that for the whole game, like let's say we do that from the start, we tell our players, congratulations, you're level 1, you are going to be going up against the Dark Knight, who happens to be a level 20 anti-paladin. Everyone knows he lives in a big castle, commands fire giants, and of course anyone who has gone near the whole place has mysteriously been turned into salts of pillar, which have been left to crumble into a field of the dead. Level 1 players look at that and go, huh, you don't say. Well, good luck with that. This is not really foreshadowing in the correct way. I mean, yes, it is foreshadowing, but it's jumping the gun. What you then do is you then create a sense of, I suppose, unfulfillment, where your players can't really get that sense of making progress until they really do something tangible about the guy at the end. If you introduce it right at the start, it takes ages before they get that sense, and, it sucks. I played a campaign where, long story short, some Fae had snuck into a town, kidnapped a whole bunch of kids, taken the souls to the first world, so they had like husks of children like wandering around, which is super creepy, and we had to go save them. We started this quest at level 5, and we completed it at level 20. Needless to say, it was a fun game, but we just struggled with that sense of achievement. There was some times where I feel like, I don't know if I did or my character did, we would just cry because it's like, oh my god, I cannot believe we've been at this in-game and out of game for a year, and we still don't even have a single child's soul. We have not made any progress in this quest since we started it. It's a terrible feeling. It's a terrible feeling. So you want to make sure you pace out your foreshadowing. Don't jump the gun and don't reveal everything about your villain and your master plan too early. Because we as GMs can be super prideful of our plots and our stories. Of course we want to share them with people because, well, why else write them? Why else take these people on that journey? My biggest advice with that is if you do want to avoid it, talk to some people, mutual friends or people who aren't associated. Hell, even me. Come to my Discord channel. Say hi. Share your stories. And of course, it's a really good way to get that fix, get that sense of like pride in what you've done without necessarily jumping the gun on your big reveal. So fear and foreshadowing. Fear and foreshadowing is very important. Once you have done that, once you've established who this villain is, how they've come to power and how they influence the world, and of course revealed this to your players, the next step is getting your players invested in that villain and their fall. This is what we call the personal stakes. What is in it for your players to either, to reward them for defeating the villain, or what is going to happen if they don't? So there are two angles. One is a motivation and the other is a deterrent. One, you want something. This could be the villain is in possession of a rare artifact that your player wants. This is a reward. Slay this man, you get the artifact. Easy. A deterrent could be something like, well, yes, if you leave this man to his own devices, the artifact is going to trigger the end of days. He and his castle are going to be fine, but everyone in the countryside is going to be wiped out, including you and everyone you care for and love. This is a deterrent to avoiding the quest. You don't want to avoid the quest because, well, you'll die. So of course you go on the quest. For me, there are many ways to get players personally invested, and I am smiling now because I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me right now, but bear with me. One thing I love doing is murdering things that my players love. Yes, I know. It's one of those things that you don't really want to use too often. It's something that a lot of GMs who are very callous, very heartless, can only do if they really commit to the idea that you want your players to hate someone in your game. Killing animal companions is solid gold. I for one know that anytime a player has an animal companion, hell, even if sometimes if my players don't play a class that have an animal companion, I'll give them an animal companion just so that I can kill it during this particular step. I know I shouldn't laugh. It's terrible, it's horrible, and it puts my players through an emotional roller coaster, but it works, right? And that's the important thing. My players then unite in a common goal for their personal stake against my villain. For me, I think one of the very interesting personal stakes I've ever seen kind of happen in a campaign was we all kind of had to. Oh, geez, let me try and remember this. So we had a campaign where all of us were very, very different. No one was really clicking as a group. We were just all over the shop. We didn't really have anything in common. We didn't share any common goals. We were kind of in that thrust together type of game. And for us, we had a moment where we were very, very fond of this one particular NPC. It turned out that this NPC was actually in cahoots with our main villain the whole time. And he had actually been feeding us misinformation during our adventure. We, at that point, felt such a visceral betrayal. We honestly, like, I'm not even joking. This person had saved us on so many occasions, had kept us on the straight and narrow, had talked to us when we were sad and kind of depressed over certain events that had happened in the story. So when it turned out that he was part of the villain, no one believed it. We thought, it's a doppelganger. It's not the real person. We've got to go save the real guy. And when we find out, like, no, it was him. And it was him the whole time. And then it got revealed all the stuff that this NPC had done. Like that all, like, we suddenly became 5 individuals all working together. It was a streamlined team that had the one goal of not only taking out the guy who'd betrayed us, but the guy he'd been working for as well. So personal stakes are an incredible tool, and you definitely want to make sure that you have a moment for that in your campaign with a villain. All right, the next one is very interesting. Now, there are 3, in my opinion, quests that one can achieve while pursuing a villain. The first is the chase, where your villain is chasing your PCs and your PCs have the goal of escaping. The second is the hunt, where the players are hunting after or chasing down the villain. The third type of quest is basically standing still. You have something that the villain is after, or you have to protect something from the villain, like protect a city, protect a town, or things like that. So you just have to hold your ground. Those 3 particular quests are the common ones that players will have when trying to achieve the enemy's downfall. My recommendation is decide at this point, once you've established the personal stakes, once you've established all of this stuff, who your villain is, what it is that influences the world, how it's foreshadowing, you then have the objective of creating the mission that your players need to be on. Chase, hunt, or stand your ground. Those are the 3 types. Pick a type and then focus on that. Build it. And then as the game progresses, as it moves through its various narrative twists and turns that you will write for your amazing campaign, change it up a bit. Have them go from, all right, we are chasing down information about this key. This key is going to open the box that is going to help save our kingdom. So they chase it. They go into the forest. They find a temple in the forest. They head into the temple. They locate a lieutenant of the bad guy who has now turned his attention to these heroes who have shown up out of the blue. The heroes run because this guy is way too powerful. The villain, lieutenant, then starts to hunt the players. As they hunt the players, they have escaped with the key, but now they have to make it to the chest. But to make it to the chest, they have to bypass this guy who's hunting them. So once they get there, they need to find a way to lose him. So they go to a village and so on and so forth. You see what I'm saying? Changing it through those 3 different stories, That's going to be how you conduct your adventure. Now, once your adventure has run its course, once you've started, sort of playing around, making your way through, and it comes to the time where your villain needs to start winding down or being defeated, you actually need to have them be defeated. But this step is called victory with a question mark, or as I like to say, victory. So victory is basically where your players achieve something. They manage to, I suppose, overcome the immediate threat or the immediate challenge. But that is not the end of the villain. That is not the real objective. When we look at the hero's journey, there is a moment in it towards the third act where, as we build things up from that victory, we learn that we've actually been defeated. Something has been lost. You have defeated the lieutenant that was chasing you, the one that met you in the temple. But once you've defeated him, you learnt that he was just there to keep you off the scent. The real villain has managed to break into the temple and find the chest that you were after. And not only that, he doesn't need the key to open it. He understands a sacred magical ritual that will crack it open and take your last hope from you. So while you've achieved victory, at the same time you have lost, and the villain has seized the advantage. That is what this moment is all about. Now, in this moment, you want to know your players as best you can. Try and predict how they're going to act and how they're going to react to the fact that they have lost in some way. What I like to do at this point is I like to remember that you shouldn't, as a GM, get into the habit of gloating by little, but don't smirk when you roll a natural 20. Don't giggle and say, oh guys, hey, check this out. Look what I rolled behind the DM screen. Don't do any of that sort of stuff. When you get to this point, you need to be as humble a GM as possible, because you need to let it sink in that there has been a defeat. Yep, but this is not the end of our story. This is not the end of your story. This isn't where you lie down and let the villain win. This is where you rise up to the occasion and you become and you seize your true names as heroes of this adventure. That's what this moment's about. Your victory is them pulling themselves up from that, I suppose, win-loss, if that makes sense. All right, so the last step is the final and most awesome step, the fall of the villain. Now, the reason I say the fall of the villain is because there are many ways to constitute a villain's defeat. They die, they get banished, they simply run out of time, they don't have their objective in hand at the moment that they need it. All of these things really, really matter because, well, victory can come in so many different shapes and flavors, and it's important to remember that this moment is your moment of triumph for your players. You need to either be or act as if you were not expecting them to win. You were expecting them to lose and fall down to the power of this thing that you have spent ages building up through all of these steps, only to have the victory snatched away from you in a bittersweet moment. That is your grand finale with your villain. That is the final checkpoint, the moment where they have been truly bested by your players. So, these are the elements of the villain's journey, and I highly recommend that, look, you may not necessarily want to follow each and every one of these steps, but keep them in mind. Simply having them in the background, knowing where your villain is, where you are in the journey, definitely helps shape and guide your hand as you play out these villains. It also helps you build up and polish a higher quality of villain, especially when you want to use multiple villains, or if you want to maybe play an anti-hero. This stuff is the beginning of a great anti-hero story where the fall usually results in them becoming a hero again. Dragon Ball Z is a great example. Let's take Vegeta. The birth of a villain. I am Prince Vegeta, king of the Saiyans. Rise to power. All the Saiyans are dead, there are only a handful left, and the Prince of Saiyans is now the ruler of them, the last remaining noble caste. Fear and foreshadowing. Raditz shows up and tells Goku, hey, you, there are more Saiyans. I'm going to kidnap your son and come back later. Personal stakes. You are the last member of the proud Saiyan race. And Goku has died, but these villains are still coming because they're after the Dragon Balls. Goku does not want everyone to die, so he's going to come back. The chase or the hunt. Standing ground is where we're going to be looking at that. And I know I only put 2 there, but I mean, standing ground is very tough. But standing your ground. The villains have come here and you need to stop them from doing what they're doing. Victory. They managed to defeat Vegeta. They managed to send him back into into space and off to do his own thing. Oh wait, sorry, no, I forgot. That would be Nappa being defeated. So Nappa gets defeated. Vegeta now realizes that, oh well, now I have to get my hands dirty. Then Goku comes and kicks his ass. At this point, that's when we then go to the next plot with the next villain, the birth of the villain. Frieza shows up, rise to power, Frieza core, fear and foreshadowing, Vegeta is afraid of something, personal stakes, Vegeta knows about the whole thing with Namek, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. And of course, at this point, we see Vegeta go from the fall being his death. Instead of his death, it's now he has become an anti-hero. He has now stepped into that realm where he is now one of the good guys. Lo and behold, that is the benefit, the power, of the villain's journey. It can be applied to a number of situations and a whole bunch of things that you can use to make your game special, unique, and awesome. Alright guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope this wasn't too confusing. I did try to make this from scratch, so I do apologize. If you've got any other steps or any other suggestions, leave a comment below. Let me know. I'd love to discuss how much merit this thing has with you guys. If you want to chat with me directly, of course, head to the Discord channel. As much as I love chatting with you guys on YouTube, I don't check YouTube as much as I check my Discord. So head over there, say hi, say what's up, share with me your stories and your tales. We have a great community there. Of course, go and check us out on other social media such as Facebook and Twitch. We've got some live shows running, which are always a lot of fun. And if you want to support the Dead Aussie Gamer, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/deadausiegamer. And, you guys can really help us out. Just keep the lights on and make sure that this channel, this show, all this stuff keeps growing, keeps, being awesome for you guys. Till next time, as always, game hard or die trying. See yas.